Okay, it's recording.
Fantastic. Hi, everybody. Um, Congratulations on everyone on surviving another session of the Indiana General Assembly and a budget year at that, and a tight budget year at that. Um, we will go over some of the biggest bills of the session that will affect your schools in general, like the budget and some of the other highlighted bills of the whole session. Um, then some of the bills that affect private schools in particular. Um, and then I've got a ton of slides on, kind of going somewhat down in order of, possibility of them affecting you and your direct lives and your kids and your schools. So I probably will not actually go through every single slide, but we'll send this out afterwards. And I want you all to have this information. You feel free to read up on your own. And of course, to ask questions on anything either that we do cover or that we don't cover. We want to fill you in on all the details that you want, but we don't want to bore you to death today. And it would also just be a lot to absorb in one day. So with that, oh, and by the way, my colleagues from IQE, I invite you all to jump in anytime I misspeak or miss some important details, because I'm sure that that will happen. So please, any of you jump in. And participants, please jump in yourselves with questions. You can just speak up, or you can put it in the chat. We'll try to keep an eye on the chat too, so we can answer things as we go through. With that, I don't know if I introduced myself. I'm Marcy Brown Carter with the Institute for Quality Education. I want to thank all my IQE colleagues for everything that they did to help us reach some pretty awesome milestones this year, in addition to all of you on the call who I know were called into service and into action as well, to help get some pretty awesome things passed, between January and last week. So with that, let's get to some content. As you all know, I'm sure it's been in every headline and every, community across the state. It was a pretty historic year for school choice in Indiana. These numbers for these bills are just not super important, just gives you um, a little bit of a view on how many bills are filed and how much has to happen during the session to get from day one in January to the last day in April. So, well over 1,200 bills ended up being filed. As Betsy just sent me some updated numbers, I did my own counting, which is a little bit off, but it's close. Right around 20% of all bills passed ended up, or all bills filed ended up actually being passed. Um, and similar numbers just for education focused bills. So that gives you an idea of how many make it all the way through the process. Slide. As you all, I'm sure, know too, we faced pretty serious fiscal headwinds during, towards the end of session. We had a state fiscal report forecast come out that indicated that we were likely to come in over 2 billion, well over $2 billion below, what we needed to ideally, have a flush budget like we all would have liked. Um, which really affected those last few weeks of session and the way that the Senate then released their version of the budget, which cut out almost everything that our school choice advocates wanted. And then to get to the end of the day where we had some pretty major victories was really fantastic. As you all know, in addition to the budget being passed, which contains a lot of the important policies that we wanted to see, there was a major property tax bill which affects homeowners and citizen taxpayers in general. But language was added in that allows charter schools to share in education focused property taxes in a pretty major way for the first time. So we'll touch on that too. Then, like I said, legislation that specifically touches on private schools, and then some more general education legislation. slide. We'll go straight into the budget, the biggest thing that passed. As you all are likely well aware, universal vouchers passed. That's for all families, regardless of income or any other factors. But that will not go into effect this coming school year, though. It will start in the fall of 2026. So that means schools and school communities and the state has an entire school year to prepare logistically for, potential things like adding new seats, relooking at their own tuition policies and, really having great time to prepare to hit the ground running when they can welcome potentially any family in the state in with a voucher. Another really positive thing is we'll have 2 voucher payments per semester instead of just 1. Is there anything else regarding the choice scholarship from my colleagues that we should note right here and right now off the top? Nope. Okay, those are the highlights on that.
Marcy, Betsy, really quick. Sorry, it took me a second to get off mute. I don't know who all's on, but some are also very interested in the fact that there is ability to participate in the program with provisional accreditation now. So that did pass. I've received from a couple people sort of periodically throughout the session the importance of getting that passed. So if those folks are on, just wanted to note that passed.
Thank you. Yes, that is true. Regarding the tax credit scholarship, that many of you know, IQE is a scholarship granting organization, the state's largest. So we are also very interested in anything that touches on this. The tax credit scholarship was held steady at the current level of 18.5 million annually, which is a good thing. And ESAs and CSAs, we were hoping to get those programs increased because there are currently already waiting lists for those relatively new programs. Unfortunately, given the tightness of the budget, those were not able to be increased beyond the current line items of 10 million. So those are staying in place at the same amounts that they currently are. But one interesting thing that they did was move the administration of the program from the state treasurer's office to the State Department of Education, not starting for this current school year, but starting for 2026-27. So that's just an interesting thing that they did there. Anything else my colleagues want to say about either the tax credit scholarship or the ESA CSA before we move? Oh, I have a question on the 2 voucher payments. I don't think that this was indicated in law, but maybe I'm wrong. Is there any idea on the dates for the 2 voucher payments?
I'm pulling up the language right now. I think they have to be sort of evenly distributed in the semester. So like, not one day and one the very next day, but I'm pulling up the language right now because I don't recall.
Okay, we'll jump back in with Betsy when she finds that language. Any other questions, I should say, on these really, really important pieces of the state budget from anyone before we move on? Okay, we'll keep thinking of more questions. If you have any, we'll answer them at any point. Ted, you can switch to the next slide. We're still talking about the state budget here. For charter schools, another question from Kenny. Betsy, while you're looking, do the 2 payments start this coming fall or the fall after in 26-27? I don't recall seeing, or I don't remember what the year was or if it even indicated. So for charter schools in the budget, it was an uphill battle toward the end of the budget process, but we were able to maintain the current $1,400 per student charter and innovation school grant. That really helps make up for the fact that charter schools don't receive property tax amounts of money that our public school counterparts do. And we face anywhere from that approximate $1,400 shortfall to, closer to even or over $8,000 difference in IPS. So that's a really, really important line item for charter schools. On the slightly less fantastic side, the budget this current biennium that we're just winding down now, given the flushness of the budget at that point, was able to include a $25 million grant for charter schools for facilities, which again was an effort to help make up the shortfall that charter public schools don't receive, while our traditional public school counterparts do get money from property taxes for facilities. So unfortunately, in the budget crunch toward the end, that line item was not refilled. So no more charter school facilities grant this biennium, unfortunately. Virtual charter school students and virtual traditional school students have been and will continue to be funded at 85% of tuition support. The House and as IQE wanted to see that raised to minimum of 90, 95, but ideally 100% since they're whole students, not 85% of students. And the Senate wanted to lower that to 70%. So we met in the middle at 85% where it's been. So not a gain, not a loss there. Adult charter schools had been held in place at the same very low amount of tuition support per student for, I think it was 4 budgets or even more than that. They had seen no increases whatsoever. So, and they're not part of the traditional funding formula. They are stuck at their own, per pupil amount in the budget. So as you can see there, they are finally getting an increase, which is really, really fantastic for those schools. For all schools, all public schools, for tuition support, they will see a 2% increase in each year of the biennium. That was a commitment by everyone involved in the State House to, despite the incredibly tough, fiscal outlook, to maintain public school in general, K through 12 school funding as, by far the top line item in the state budget, but is very close to half the entire state budget as possible. Any questions on those things before we move on past the budget? Okie doke, keep going. The next big thing we'll talk about is property tax reform affecting schools in the Senate, Senate Bill 1 or Senate Enrolled Act 1 as it is now that it's been passed. School districts will now going forward in certain circumstances be required to share property taxes proportionally with charter schools in their, with that or within their district. And then, there are a few big qualifiers to that. And those are that only districts that have 100 or more students attending charter schools or 2 or more % of total students attending charter schools have to do any kind of sharing at all. And the list of school districts that includes is very short, considering there's, around 300 districts in the state. So, so that really cuts down a lot administratively on the number of districts that have just, a very few number of students attending charter schools. Another big qualifier is that we're only talking about property taxes that are keyed toward operational expenses. And that includes levies and referenda, and not any levies or referenda that are keyed toward capital or debt service or transportation. None of those will be shared with charter schools. And the third big qualifier is that sharing is only slated to begin with charter schools in 27, 28. So that is, even out past this biennium. So it's a ways out, but that gives school districts time to plan for this and adjust their spending, and for charter schools to do some really good long-term budget planning on their end too. And then, of course, this is a really big law, so it also cleans up a lot of administrative and logistical code sites about how this works on ballot language, timelines, rules for, how to participate in the property tax sharing, et cetera. I see another question about the SGO. SGO going to be universal starting in 26, 27 as well. I believe that is a no. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank
Sorry, I'm
you.
trying to do several things at once.
No worries. I appreciate the confirmation.
Yeah, that's a no. There
Unfortunately,
are no changes to the SGO program for the period right now.
okay. Any questions about the property tax sharing piece? Okay, we will move on then. So here's some language from bills that specifically points out non-public schools. One that really flew through the legislative process this year. It was one of the first bills to be signed into law by the governor. Was 1102 is contracting for preschool programs. So this would allow public schools to contract with religiously affiliated organizations to provide pre-K programs. So that's we're looking at church affiliated schools who are already doing a fantastic job providing pre-K in your area. Now your local or any school district would be allowed to contract with you to provide that also for their students. So I really hope some positive conversations are already potentially happening in your communities. And if they are, we'd love to hear about that. So we can kind of publicize, really positive partnerships between public and non-public schools. Another one that's going to be a big one that you're going to hear a lot of talk about over the coming the rest of 2025 in particular, and then through the next school year as it's implemented more is 1498. As you probably recall, it's been a long time now since the state has issued A through F school accountability grades, but folks haven't forgotten about them entirely. There is going to be a requirement that the State Board of Education establishes a new and updated system for school performance for accountability, and that they do that by the end of this calendar year. And that system is going to be required to utilize A through F grades. The state board or IDOE has already presented a proposed, like a first draft proposal of what that system would look like. And throughout the rest of the year, there will be kind of updates to that proposal as they take it around the state and talk to different stakeholders and see what, pieces of that folks like and what pieces that they don't like. But again, that's something that you'll really want to keep your eye on this year. However, for the current school year, null grades or no grades will once again be given to all schools. So now there are a lot of schools that were, of course, really interested in seeing that continue for at least another year. Another non-public school specific bill was 1348 for non-accredited public schools. This is talking about a situation where if you are an attendee of a non-accredited non-public school, that some institution of higher education may question your qualifications. But this now law will say that going forward, a high school diploma, your high school diploma that you get from your non-accredited non-public school is sufficient to demonstrate that the student has indeed met all high school requirements. And that state institutions of higher ed may not discriminate against people with such a diploma. So that is good news for our non-accredited friends. Any questions about those three? Okay, slide. Here's another one. We had a lot of bills that are titled various education matters or education matters or education matters and higher education matters. These are bills that we're just allowed to, the topics may be varied, within the bill, but they're all relating to education. So this one in particular is the one that Betsy mentioned earlier. This is where the language landed that allows non-public schools that have received provisional accreditation from a regional or national body to participate in the voucher program. So that's great news. Um, Another one that could potentially affect, but maybe not, this would stop a situation where a parent would potentially be an ESA provider and then charge the state back for providing ESA services for their own student when they were also only providing ESA services for their own student. So I think I remember them saying they weren't actually aware of such a situation occurring, but they wanted to shut down the possibility of such a situation even possibly occurring. So now that will be prohibited going forward. The next piece of this law is one that I need to go back and read really carefully to see if non-public schools are part of this requirement or not, if our accredited non-public schools are part of this requirement. But that would be for schools that have less than 70% of students who've passed the third grade iRead exam would be required to participate in the Indiana literacy cadre that the IDOE runs. I think before it was an offering that IDOE had out there and said, anybody who really wants to up their literacy instruction, please feel free to join this cadre. And now it's just going to be a requirement for some of the lower performing schools on iRead. But again, this, and I'll note this several times as we go through other bills, there's a few points where I just didn't have time to get into the tiniest details of everything since session ended. So there's a few things I'll be going back and reading real in depth and getting back to you with details. All right, slide. Here's a couple last notes from this same bill, 358. Will require principals and assistant principals and instructional coaches to obtain a literacy endorsement to be relicensed going forward after 2027. And IDOE is already required to publish a list of high quality curricular materials that they've reviewed in STEM fields. And this will add English language arts to that list of curriculum materials they kind of have to evaluate and then post what they, in their opinion, believe are high quality materials starting in 2027. Those are not required, I don't think, but as a really nice guide for schools who would like, a good starting place when they go out and pick new curriculum. Any questions about 358 or anything else that we've touched on so far?
Marcy, I did look at 358 and the 70% or less passing iRead requirement for participation in the literacy cadre applies to all types of schools, including non-pubs.
Okay. I was kind of thinking it might, since it had to do with a state exam, but thank you for confirming that. Okay, I think that we can move on to the next slide. 1515 was a huge bill that ended up having all kinds of different provisions in it. So we're going to be on 1515 for a number of slides here. So please feel free to stop me at any point if you want us to clarify anything on 1515. So this was a bill that we were really excited about because it gave part of it, or one of the original bill, at least before a lot of things were added to it, was doing a lot of things that some of our non-public schools had really wanted to participate in, but had previously not been allowed to under state law. So some of those include being allowed now to form a school police department if you're an accredited non-public school. That's something that public schools have been able to do for some time now. Now also for going forward, parents of eligible voucher students will have a process by which they can petition IDOE if they believe they were denied a voucher due to some inaccuracy in their enrollment data. So this is something that's actually happened before where students were denied vouchers because there was some inaccuracy about their enrollment. So now they will legally be allowed to go to IDOE and have a petition to go through that process to correct that data and then to obtain their voucher. We'll also, oh, yes, for the first time now going forward, accredited non-public schools and charter schools will be able to participate in the STEM Teacher Recruitment Fund, which is a nice, bonus. Everybody's got teacher shortages, so there's one nice thing to add to your recruitment abilities. And then accredited non-public schools will also be able to participate in the Indiana State Principal Institute. Let's keep moving on 1515. These are so less pieces that the bill still affects, has a lot of pieces for non-public schools. These two particular pieces don't quite as much, but these are particularly for virtual schools. IDEA will publish a report on the academic readiness of students enrolling in virtual schools and programs. I think this is a one-time only report that they have to do in the next year or two, and which won't cause that you or your schools to do any work. And this next one is a further clarification on a provisions around trying to decrease uh, the potential for students to enroll in virtual schools, but then to not really participate in any learning. So this will say that the virtual school or program must automatically withdraw any student who is absent 10 consecutive days or 18 cumulative days. Previously, it just talked about 10 days in general. So this kind of clarifies that and makes it a little bit easier for virtual schools and programs. Okay, we can move on. Okay, still on 1515. So this is a little bit lower likelihood of happening, but for public schools only, this will not affect you if you're a non-public school. But if there's a situation in a public or charter school where a family makes an allegation of misconduct against an employee, and then the school would subsequently conduct an investigation that ended up resulting in the dismissal of the allegation or non-substantiation of the allegation, they still must notify the parents and the employee. So it just talks about, that kind of situation that hopefully none of you will ever run into. Additionally, a very high profile situation in Indianapolis where a new charter school was looking to locate in a church that had, school classrooms and facilities in it, but it was in Washington Township on the north side of Indianapolis, and local politics helped opponents of charter schools and opponents of that particular charter school to really make it much, much, much harder for that school to get zoning approval to use that church as a school, and indeed made that school even, I think, delay its opening by a year. So this language would say public, charter, and non-public schools would be considered a permitted use for zoning purposes in all zoning districts. And an application may not be denied for the sole reason that the school requesting it is, or that the entity requesting it is a public, charter, or non-public school. So hopefully that language will prevent local politics from stopping schools from locating in local facilities that may not be zoned for schools, but that would be really, really appropriate uses for that building. We can move on. Still on 1515. Some programs were added toward the end of session that needed a home. And two really interesting ones going forward will be the creation of these two pilot programs that we're talking about on this slide. The first one is creating the Centralized School Facilities Pilot Program in local boards. That provides direction to the Department of Education in how to administer that program. It tells us things like up to 3 pilots can be created, each of which will last 3 years. It provides details on the requirements to be a member of these local boards and a lot of like logistical details on how the pilot will be, conducted and then concluded at the end of 3 years. So I expect on both of these to see a lot of guidance coming out of IDOE on how all these are going to work, and then how various types of schools will be needing to work together to put some of these pilots forward. So it's similar, very, very similar on the student transportation pilot program. And local boards, it will again be up to 3 pilots can be created. They will last 3 years, and it provides similar details for board membership and administration, how the pilot will be conducted and how the pilot can be concluded. So, once again, these could be really interesting, really exciting. I know they are going to want to see geographical diversity in where they do these pilots, potentially larger cities, smaller towns, maybe rural areas, on how we can coordinate better between our different types of schools, and use taxpayer resources a lot more efficiently in the facilities and transportation areas in particular. So these are going to be really fun to watch in the coming years. Anybody have any questions or comments on those? Okay, next page. This might be the last page on 1515. 2 more major things that are going to be created under this law are a mastery-based education pilot program. This was an idea that was really, really being pushed by Representative Bob Baining, who's the House Education Chair, who's really been interested in, as you all know, it's been a really big push the last few years in general about kind of reinventing high school and making it more meaningful for students and helping them, enter education, continuing education or the local economy more prepared out of the gate to be successful. So this pilot program would be administered by the IDOE, and public and charter schools could participate in the program to create a different sort of system for high schoolers to move through their high school years as they master material, not just on I sat in my seat for a semester and therefore I'm done with chemistry, as an example kind of thing. So again, a lot of details yet to be determined. I would expect a lot of guidance coming with, forthcoming over the summer or fall from IDOE on how they will invite applications for that pilot. But again, should be really, really interesting things to watch over the next few years. And last, the Indianapolis Local Education Alliance. For those of you who live in Indianapolis, who are near Indianapolis, who consume Indianapolis media, there's been a lot of drama between IPS and the local charter school community, in particular over access to facilities, over property tax sharing, over everything. It seems like has been a dramatic struggle. We all know that IPS is not in great financial shape. Charter schools are gaining a greater share of the enrollment population in IPS every year, to the point that charter schools now enroll the majority of students who live in the IPS boundaries. But a lot of folks still don't want to see, IPS completely crumble. So this is kind of the result of a lot of work, a lot of pressure, but brought to bear on IPS to come to the table to really talk frankly about their financial future. Anyway, this local Indianapolis Local Education Alliance will exist to assess all local school facilities and to develop facilities and transportation plans with the goal of long-term sustainability. It will require the creation of a centralized process to approve or deny new levy requests for capital expenditures, which should be in a coordinated basis based on what the community actually needs as a whole. And kind of in exchange for all of this, there will be a 6-month moratorium on all new charter approvals in Indianapolis, aside from those that will be authorized by the Indianapolis mayor's office. The mayor of Indianapolis will also be the chair of this alliance. And of course, he runs the charter school office. So that would certainly make sense that his office would still be able to authorize. But again, that's only a 6-month moratorium. And I believe it starts July 1st and ends at the end of this calendar year. So again, a lot of interesting things are likely to come out of that, and hopefully really positive things for the students and the community. Questions or thoughts or anything to add about those? Okay, slide. All right, this was another really big push in the General Assembly this year, and one that IQE was supportive of. That's around improving math education. I'm sure you all are well aware there's been a huge push around literacy education in the recent years. And so folks didn't want to forget about improving math instruction as well. So this clarifies current law around teaching math to require, what people would say are the probably the most scientifically based instructional strategies, which I'm no math expert, so that's apparently what they are there. It will also require IDOE to review teacher prep programs for alignment with those requirements, and fail to conform with those requirements after a long process of giving them time to fix their programs. Could potentially cause a revocation of accreditation for those programs. That's again after a long time of giving them a chance to fix their and update their programs. These requirements are kind of in line and similar to what's been required in the past on the literacy front. So this is just sort of trying to make things equal on the math and literacy fronts. All right, you can shift. Excuse me, there's a little more here. It will also require all public middle schools for all their students who score above proficient in iLearn and earn a C or higher in their local grading system, to be automatically enrolled in advanced math. Parents, of course, can opt out of this requirement if they want to, but this is a push to push kids, to push schools to get more kids into and advancing through math quicker, and probably getting to a higher level math before they graduate from high school, and starting that at an earlier point in time in middle school. Additionally, starting in 26-27, accredited non-public schools and public schools must administer a math screener to kindergarten, first and second grade students to identify students who are at risk of not meeting their proficiency standards. So given the wide applicability of this to basically everybody, you can expect IDOE to be sending out a lot of guidance on this. I haven't heard anything specific about this yet. Additionally, starting in 26-27, any student in K-8 who is deemed to be at risk of not achieving grade level proficiency in math must be provided with an intervention that meets certain criteria that are outlined in the law. So again, I would imagine that this is again something to watch out for, a large amount of guidance from IDOE on what that is supposed to entail. Questions, thoughts, concerns, or anything else to add around math instruction from anyone? Okay, we can move on. We're starting to get close to the point where some of these are not as directly related to many of your schools, but I will go through a few more slides. A big one that was just talked about a lot during session in general was Senate Bill 146 on teacher compensation. The biggest headline here is that, for public schools, the minimum that schools are supposed to pay teachers going forward is going to be moved up from 40,000 to 45,000. The vast majority of teachers are already meeting the minimum of 40 and many even of 45, but that's, the obvious goal to just have our teachers be better paid around the state. IDOE will also be studying the feasibility of increasing school health plan options. Everybody knows the expense of health plan for no matter where you work is pretty tough. Um, and then they're establishing an Indiana teacher recruitment program. There was not very much information about what that's going to look like. And I'm not even 100% sure if it got a specific line item. I don't think it did. Although IDOE did get a big pot of discretionary money that perhaps they'll choose to use some of that on this teacher recruitment program. Another one specifically for public schools is 249, and that will allow school districts to give teachers, especially in high need subject areas, supplemental pay that's outside of their district, their union approved salary schedule. So that is one way to get around collective bargaining and recognize that, sometimes you need to pay the high school math teacher or the, physics teacher more to entice them to come be a teacher than, perhaps, another type of teacher that's more abundant. Um, Questions or thoughts about teacher compensation? Okay, we can move to the next slide. I'm gonna have you skip this one. This one's not as relevant to folks, but you'll have this information, like I said, everybody. This is an interesting one, and this 1064, I think this will apply to non-public schools too, but this is one that I have noted here to check on my own to make sure that it applies. And that would end the prohibition that students may not transfer to other school district or schools primarily for athletic reasons. So, we all know that the college athletic universe is changing drastically. So this is kind of perhaps a recognition on the high school level too that world is changing. If you happen to be a public school, there's a new requirement in HEA 1285 that schools may not prevent a parent from recording a student's IEP meetings. And this very last bullet on this slide, again, I'm not 100% sure off the top of my head if it applies to non-public schools, but I will do some checking to make sure. And that would require a school to allow any families or parents to come collect any property of their students that is at school if the student transfers, drops out, or passes away. Let's go to the next slide. Let's see here. This 1499 Education Matters, those last two slides will make iRead, will offer an additional opportunity for students to take iRead during the summer after their third grade year. Oops, I have a spelling mistake there. Sorry about that. Not third grade year, but third grade year. So just to give students one more chance to move on to fourth grade in line with the rest of their cohort, which is great. It will also require IDOE to establish a way for schools to exempt English language learners from the iRead retention requirement. So they will be able to register and go through a formal process to show that the student is an English language learner and couldn't reasonably be expected to pass iRead on time. Slide. I think we can skip this one. Let's see here. I think we can skip this one too, just to know that these bills are out there and you can do more reading about them if you want. Okay, thank you, Betsy. She looked up the 1285, the collection of student property only applies to a school corporation, does not apply to non-public schools. One that was talked about in the news a lot, which probably doesn't affect your schools directly, but which may affect your communities, is that going forward, school board candidates must list on the ballot their political affiliation. They will be able to say not affiliated or nonpartisan, those things too, if they can show that that's true. There's a lot of provisions administratively around that in this part of the law too, but going forward, that will be the way school board elections happen in Indiana. Slide. Again, in this very last bullet here around high school issues and CTE, there is a career coaching grant that's going to be established that IDOE will administer. Again, this might be something that they want to use some of their pot of discretionary funding to fund. There was no information about what that might look like, or from what I recall, who might be eligible. But again, this might be something that, keep in the back of your mind. If you're a high school, that you might look out for guidance from IDOE coming up, in the coming year to see if that might be something that you could participate in. Slide. Superintendents will no longer be required to have a master's degree. They certainly can. You can skip the rest of this one. There's that student. Some of the requirements. Yep. Yeah, I think you can skip this one as well. This one is, it could be relevant in your world, possibly if you're a non-public school. Certainly won't be a problem for IQE's SGO, but the IDOE may, going forward, suspend or terminate the certification of an SGO if it hasn't granted a scholarship for 3 consecutive years or within the first 2 years of its operation. Again, nothing you all have to be worried about whatsoever if you're working with IQE. And this is a nice one just for parents, that employers may not, take an adverse employment action against an employee who misses work to attend their child's case conference committee or an attendance conference. Slide. There was a lot of talk in the General Assembly on instruction on human sexuality. I don't believe these are a lot of requirements around if a school chooses to teach it. So I would advise you, if that's something that you're worried about, that you can read the bill yourself. We can talk about it separately, and it might even be something that you reach out to your counsel on. But I doubt it's going to be a huge concern to a lot of you if you're at non-public schools. Slide. This is a lot of requirement for IDOE and the Commission for Higher Education. Again, I leave it in there in case you're interested, but I think we can skip this one. Absenteeism obviously has been a huge concern for everybody since before, but especially since COVID. This bill redefines chronically absent as missing 10% or more of school days for any reason. And then requires IDOE to do some, reporting and looking into, how to report properly based on what are really excused absences and what are not excused absences. And then would also, I'm sure a lot of you are aware that that prosecutors are able to, take parents to court for, I think it's an educational neglect or other things. I'm looking, sorry, at the 4th bullet. This would require multiple sort of, I don't know the best word to use, maybe like hand-holding, meeting, talking with the student, talking with the parents, some much more friendly and hopefully productive ways to deal with a chronically absent student and their family prior to taking any like formal legal action, like actual prosecution, or related to absenteeism. And then it says public and charter schools may not expel or suspend students solely because of chronic absence. Okay, we can go forward. Look at that. We made it. A lot of bills. Again, we went through a whole lot of bills in less than an hour. I still did most of the talking, so I hope that you're kind of just thinking through some of these things. We will send this presentation out. You feel free to click on this link that has a link to information about all the bills, education bills, I should say, that passed. So you can do some more reading at your leisure. Um, Contact us, please, if now or anytime in the future, if you've got some confusion or anything you want to talk through. We're always here. Last or another, there's another slide. Oh yes, in our wonderful My School Options outreach team, will be hosting parent information sessions in the coming months on program and policy changes. So expect to see their faces out and about around the state, where hopefully by that point there will be some additional guidance on some of these issues. So there might even be more to talk about and more, in-depth things to dig into with them. So again, look forward to hearing about those sessions coming to communities around the state. And I think we have one final slide with contact information. Many of you are well aware of how to get a hold of any or all of us at IQE. So we, again, as always, welcome you to get in touch with us and ask more questions, share your thoughts. We are so close to being out of time, and I really, really thank you all for taking the time to listen to me jabber on about all these bills. But I'm going to be quiet now and see again if my colleagues have anything that they want to add or correct me on, and if any of you have other thoughts or questions to share. I think everyone is pretty much mostly happy that they know the future of vouchers becoming universal, and that's pretty much good enough for most people. So we're all excited about that too. Hearing nothing else, we can wind down a little bit early, but again, you know how to reach us, so please feel free to reach out. Thank you again to all of you who joined in the effort to get vouchers passed and get a lot of other things passed. We really, truly couldn't do it without your participation and your support. Legislators, they like us, but they like you all a lot more who come from their local communities. So thanks again.